The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Hello and welcome back to the show. We are finishing up our series on business scandals and hoping you can look at systems you operate in through a different lens to spot the zombie problems that could rise from the dead and damage your business and reputation. And yes, we'll be talking briefly about those zombie sea urchins again. I'm Stephen Sakach here once again with Tullio Siragusa and Ash Maher. Hey guys.
Hey everybody.
So we've looked across business scams from a variety of sectors. In the last episode, we went over parts of that make up a system, right? So these could be any part of a system that you have at work. And depending on your company size, maybe you've got as few as 5 systems and maybe as many as 50, 100 or more. We broke down the bad systems in the last episode, and it really stuck out that system purpose was often a problem that we saw. So just real quick, recapping those parts of the systems, you've got components, interconnections, and purpose. And that's what we talked about in the last episode when looking at scandals, those 3. And then you have boundary, inputs, process, output, feedback loop, and environment. So basically, we defined what the system purposes were in the last episode, and then we redefined what they would look like with more of a bliss mindset. And that would have completely changed the outcome, I think, of a lot of these. The system that went bad, most had some sort of foundational element like that was just wrong from early on. When you're trying to build love into your system, you don't have to be as granular as this, right? So just find an area where you can input kindness or empathy and make sure it's not just one of those single random acts of kindness, but that it's part of a system, that it's something that, you repeat. So one act of kindness and love is great, but it's fleeting. So we're proposing something that's, continual and should carry on even if you aren't there. You should be able to step away, and your impact will be made and felt in an ongoing fashion. So we want to dive into these different parts of the system so that you can question things yourself at work. And perhaps this will help you find elements that you could examine. The previous episode, as mentioned, we went through system components, interconnections, and purpose. Today, we're going to focus on inputs, process, and outputs, and finish up briefly talking about feedback loops. So if you think your system is healthy right now, it may not be. So thinking back to last week, remember I had the example of how the kelp beds in California are kind of out of whack. We've lost 95% of our kelp forests because humans are so disruptive. We have few sea otters and all the sea stars are gone, and they are what feed on the urchins. And in the absence of that, urchins fed on the kelp and thrived. And you'd think, urchins, maybe they'd go away when there's no food. But what happens? They sit in this zombie mode and they just wait. And so they could wait decades for their next opportunity. And so we want to make sure your business systems don't have zombies waiting to cause problems, even if they aren't noticeable right now. So Tullio, kick us off here. Let's go through each of these scandals and look at input, process, and output and see what the most impactful area was. You'll see a trend. I think only one company really had a flawed input as part of their system. Which was that, Tullio?
Well, that was Wells Fargo, the system-wide creation of fake accounts. That the input was sales targets, employee performance metric. That was the cause, if you will, that started all this. And then the process was basically opening accounts and processing customer information. And the output was massive number of fake accounts to go with the real ones, and bonuses for the employees for doing this. So really, when you think about it, the most impactful area on the input side was the aggressive sales targets and performance metrics, pressured these employees to engage in unethical behavior, directly leading to the scandal. So this is really the only one where the input was absolutely the failure.
Yeah, so you got the fake data, fake accounts, input into the system. What about our other two financial scandals?
Yeah, the other ones was Countrywide Financial and the subprime mortgage crisis. I mean, this impacted millions of people, caused probably the biggest bankruptcies, most of them bankruptcies ever in history. So the input here was borrowers' applications, market demand for loans. Big demand for loans, interest rates were low, and the process was the loan approval and underwriting. The output, high volume of subprime loans. Those are the input, process, and the output. Now, the most impactful area was actually in the process area, right? So on the loan approval and underwriting process, they prioritized volume over quality. And this resulted in a massive number of risky subprime loans, which contributed to really a global financial crisis, but definitely one here in the US. And then the other one is FTX. So when we analyze the input, process, output, and the most impactful area in the input, the input is customer funds, investment capital. They received a lot of it. And the process was to basically take those funds and put them through some cryptocurrency trading and to manage those funds. The output was artificially inflated financial performance. So the most impactful area of this whole trifecta was the process, right? There was a lack of transparency and ethical fund management processes, which allowed for misuse of customer funds that led to the collapse of the platform. So
yeah, and a couple of these you can see, like just the Countrywide Financial, it's a basic input, right? You're taking the borrower applications and you're just putting that in, and the output should be approval or not approval, right? But it's that process there is like, well, approve as many as we can, don't care how risky. And so that was kind of the downfall right there in that input, process, output. Ash, let's dive into our automotive scandals from this kind of same perspective.
Yeah, so for the start off with, we're going to talk about Sears Auto Centers and their fraudulent repairs. Now, this was more of a process issue. Their input was customer vehicles and repair needs, but their process of vehicle inspection and repair recommendations led to an output of unnecessary repairs and increased repair sales. So the most impactful area here was their process. The fraudulent inspection and repair recommendation process directly led to the unethical upselling of unnecessary services.
So again, just like, a normal sort of mechanic business, you'd expect you're going to inspect the vehicles, you got your vehicles, and then it's this process of, well, here's what you need that went sideways, right? So, and then the output, obviously, garbage.
Absolutely. And then we have the Dieselgate. We don't forget that Dieselgate with Volkswagen's emission scandal. So their input was vehicle designs and emission standard. But the process, emission testing, and software development led to some scandalous activity in that specific area. So their output was that vehicles that falsely met emission standards. So they went ahead and manipulated the software to falsely meet emission standards, which essentially bit them in the foot horrendously. So their most impactful area, again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, all of these car industry is their processes. So this one, the manipulation of the emission testing process through software development was the core action that led to that scandal.
So it was like, here's our vehicle, going through our process of testing. Well, it's failing the test. How can we make it past the test without actually fixing the problem? Just fixing the testing software.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then this last one to take us home was the discrimination scandal in 2015 with Honda. So their input was loan application and credit scores of specific individual, of a variety of individuals, essentially. But then with the process of loan approval and risk management, the output was discriminatory loan rates. So the most impactful area here was their process of the biased loan approval and risk assessment process directly resulted in discriminatory practices against minority borrowers with higher rates despite the same credit as others.
So I get credit reports from two people that have equally the same credit reports. It comes into the process of the human evaluating this, and they're like, I can raise the rate on this group of people a little more. And so this is what the garbage output happens. It's
Yes.
that bad process.
Yes.
All right, Tullio, let's go and do the same for healthcare again.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much consistency here. It's sort of like, input, requirement, process, how to go about it, and then output or the results.
Yeah, very little problem with the input. It's just more.
Usually that's not flawed, except for
the one. Yeah.
So I mean, here it is. Input. Purdue Pharma, right? Drug formulations, marketing campaigns. They make drugs, they market drugs, right? But in the process of doing that, they, in marketing and prescription practices, the output was high sales of opioids, widespread addiction. So when you look at the impactful area of this whole equation, it's the way they went about it. It's the process, right? They were very aggressive and misleading in their marketing process, which led to widespread overprescriptions of opioids, fueling addiction crisis. So it's just being overly aggressive, not being truthful in what they were marketing. So the process on how they went about it caused the problem. Then you have the infamous Theranos. So, investors gave them funds and research data. That's the input. We need money. We need to do R&D. Now, what they did is they went through, for their process was to develop a product and report data on that development. And the output ended up being misleading test results and fraudulent claims. So
we're not getting the data we want.
So we'll just lie about it, right? I mean, that's basically what happened. And the most impactful area was, someone could say was the output, but it really goes back to the process, because this was one of those, the only ones that had a flawed component as part of the foundation of its entire system. They didn't have the machine and they were trying to create it. So, fake it till you make it, but then again, went too far. So the product development didn't happen. And as a result, they maintained a lie and created fraudulent data reporting. So that became part of their process of how they, kept the input coming in, the investors coming in, right? So, and the R&D going was to basically say, yeah, we're making progress. We're working on it. So the product development produced the fraudulent data reporting that became their process. And then they prioritized attracting investors over creating scientific results or scientific validation. And this was really the central issue of their scandal, right? They forgot what they started to do to create value for something and to focus their attention on the scientific discovery on how to create that value, and got maybe a little greedy, definitely greedy about, hey, we can make money without any product. Let's just keep lying about it.
It's like, hey, we've got an idea. No one's going to be mad at an idea. Great, let's pursue this idea. And then investors does it work? And they're like, yeah, it works. It works. Sure, we should.
Do you have any other precedents that anybody else has done it? No. So you kind of have the ultimate disruption there. It reminds me of this commercial I used to see right before the .com bubble. I don't know if you guys remember this. There was one company. They were so blatantly in your face with this commercial. It's like, we don't need your money. We have VCs throwing money at us. We drive Ferraris and Lamborghinis. I mean, this was the commercial. I don't even remember what the company was, but I do remember that commercial because it was so obnoxious. They're basically saying, we're just spending the investors' money. We don't really care if you buy anything from us. It was so out there. It was kind of like this with these guys. They're just like, we don't need to build a product. We just get the money from the investors. That's what they did. Then continue on, look at the Veterans Health Administration. I mean, this is actually quite sad. They falsified the speed of wait time. So the input was they needed to improve patient appointment performance and meet performance metrics that were given to them as a guidance to speed things up, improve the quality of service and the speed of service. So what the process was, basically scheduling and reporting, improving that. And the output, unfortunately, was falsified wait time and data. So they couldn't solve the problem. And instead of going back and figuring out we need more budget to solve this properly, we need to look at maybe how we're operating. We need to make some improvements on our increased efficiencies, just get smart about what we do things. It was like, oh, we can't do it. Let's just fake the numbers. So the most impactful area for them, again, was the process. You might think that the input here was the problem, right? Where someone gave them a goal, maybe that wasn't realistic. But the problem is that they really kept separate records, right? So it was the process of manipulating of the scheduling and reporting process to meet performance targets that resulted in falsified data and compromised patient care. Yeah, so like, again, how you go about doing things affects the output and the impact it has on everybody.
We're getting the inputs. We need to now let's reprocess these into something better and just totally fake in order to get the output we want. So fake the output. Ash, finish up with our travel group.
Yes. So if you remember the notorious airline overbooking policy scandal, so the input for this one was simple. They were just trying to achieve passenger bookings and hit those flight schedules. They had data they were looking at.
Straightforward. This should be straightforward.
Right. Yeah. That was the input, right? The process was through using patternized data. They were running ticket sales and doing seat assignments, but essentially in the process, they were overbooking, believing that there are people that would drop out, so that they always wanted to make sure those seats were filled until the fateful day that they overbooked and they had to ask people to leave. Right? Yeah, they had to leave.
They didn't ask, they dragged people.
They dragged people out. With the ask, and then when they were like, "No, I can't," then they dragged them out. Right? So the impactful area here was the process, right? The overbooking process driven by the pursuit of maximum occupancy directly led to a customer dissatisfaction and massive legal issues. It really changed the industry when you think about it after the fact.
Yeah, and they've still got issues with it, but it's like, hey, yeah, here's our seats available. Book them. Yeah, this is a normal process. We do this everywhere, right? It's not like we go into, if I book an Airbnb, I'm getting that Airbnb. If I booked it, assuming there's not some sort of racial problem like in this next one, right?
Right. And this was an unintentional issue.
That'd be kind of funny, though. I'm sorry. That'd be kind of funny if two Airbnb just show up and they're like, no, this is my Airbnb. I think there was a movie actually about that.
No, we already booked it. We overbooked your Airbnb.
There's actually a movie about that. It turned out to be a romantic comedy, but in any case.
Airbnb didn't have the
horror movie that started that way.
Right. In real life, that would be a horror movie. Going into an Airbnb and both people are trying to check in. That would not be right.
Yeah.
There's a movie with John Candy, I think it was Summer Rental or something like that, where I think he thought he was in this really nice place and ended up in this really kind of dumpy place. But anyway, Airbnb they didn't have that problem. They had a problem of certain people not letting other certain people book a place.
Yes. Yeah, so their input was really essentially giving autonomy to the hosts that have their property on that platform, and they're renting it out, and then allowing the guests that use the platform to create their profiles and so on, which led to the unintentional result or implication of discrimination.
So I've got my input is my guest information, my profile. It's got like my picture, my name.
Yeah, show who you are, show a picture of yourself, make it all of it innocent. Right?
And the host input is like, here's my place, here's what we've got. And then now it gets to this process, the next.
Yeah, so the output is discriminatory booking practices. And again, the most impactful area here was the process that led to this, right? So the host-controlled booking acceptance process allowed for discriminatory practices against certain guests, which was not Airbnb's intention when building a system for public to book with the public, but it just happened, right? So that was really interesting. Again, unintentional.
No, a lot of good came out of this in terms of awareness and movement towards creating more awareness about just how many people didn't realize this happened related to just privilege and so on. So this chaotic situation created, in a way, a lot more awareness, which is a good thing. So
how can we fix this process that we weren't ready for? that people would discriminate. Then we gave them too much freedom there or not enough training. But
Right.
All right, last one, Ash.
Last one is my favorite, my least favorite is the Carnival Cruise Line waste dumping scandal. I think it's not that it's my favorite, least favorite. I think it's just the most bonkers one, right? Where the input was the waste generated on board and their process of disposing of all of this, right? So in their process, they had a waste management system that was simply just dumping into the ocean and contaminating it. Their literal workspace, they were contaminating it with waste product. The output led to illegal waste dumping when they eventually got caught for doing this. And again, the most impactful area was their process. The unethical and illegal waste disposal practices were the central actions of leading to the environmental scandal that Carnival Cruise found themselves in.
Yeah, so I think
I can't get over this one. I'm sorry. It's like going into a building and you throw all the garbage outside your door and in your cubicle, and then you're just walking through garbage. That's like you're dumping where you work. It's like, I don't get it.
Yeah,
big office. You just throw your trash everywhere.
Big office, and you just keep dumping into it. It's your office.
Will just disappear and not be a problem anymore. So across most of these scandals now, when we get into this part of the system, it's that process area that's obviously most frequently impactful area. And so is this stage where we're seeing like these unethical decisions, manipulations, and the fraudulent actions. And in many cases, even if the inputs were flawed or the outputs were harmful, it was the process themselves that just kind of directly enabled this to go through all the way. So I think this emphasizes the importance of kind of designing and maintaining sort of ethical, transparent, and well-regulated processes within any system. And so we had talked before about having more blissed purposes. Last week in the show, it's like the purpose seemed to really be the key thing. In this part of this stage of the system, it's really kind of that process state part of it. So if you have a poor purpose, you get off to a bad start with your foundation. When you get to this page, this stage of things are going to go sideways. And this is where those zombie problems can kind of come to life if you don't have a better purpose structure in there. I want to go over this though real quickly and just look at the outputs here. So these are business systems that are really subsystems of our larger societal system, right? And so think about that. So just let me go over how much garbage, some cases literally, was put into the world again. So we've got an increased number of just fake accounts that never existed for banking. We've got high volume of subprime loans, and this really resulted in recession and big impact to the system overall. We've got unnecessary car repairs. We've got vehicles that didn't meet emission standards. We've got discriminatory loan prices. We've got high sales of opioids and widespread addiction. And again, this is like a massive life-destroying blow to people and their families. And on a scale like right now, it's like 2 million people addicted to opioids in the US. And we've got 100,000 people will die annually from this. And so you can kind of see how bad some of these systems don't just affect their bottom line, but these are affecting larger systems. And continuing on to the other outputs, we've got falsified wait times for the veterans, so they aren't getting timely care. We've got those overbooked flights, dragging people off planes. We've got the discriminatory lodging booking processes. We've got illegal waste dumping into our oceans. And in a couple of these, we've had investors lose money, which, has happened. But you can really see just so much garbage just being dumped into the bigger system overall. And I think, we've covered just kind of 4 sectors here, and you can see just the range of problems in 4 sectors. And I believe in like that. There's the free marketplace, right? Capitalism. I believe in free speech, free marketplace ideas. You don't want to artificially stifle things, because evolution and innovation are going to be, stifled in the process. But you've also got people who are very bad actors in some of this, and that we need to have systems that have checks and balances in them, right? So you have this kind of constant struggle really between like the freedom and the regulation and rights of like the individual and the rights of the group, and back and forth. And we're trying to find a sweet spot, but this is literally over hundreds of years. And, the gravity in all this, I think, though, with this back and forth tug is really, if you think about it, is this struggle for love, right? We're pursuing profit, and we're just slowly, clumsily kind of moving toward, pursuing profit, but pursuing it with love. And you can kind of see in this process, just, I don't know, long story short, build love into scalable systems, right? You can kind of just see, though, how much garbage can get dumped into society when you're not doing that, and when you're just solely pursuing profits. And I don't know. So one part of this might have saved them, and that's the feedback loop. And this is kind of like where we often talk about having two KPIs, right? So a lot of times they've got KPIs that are revenue based, and this is very common. This is what we're focused on all the time, is these KPIs that are revenue based. But then we talk about, hey, what about some love based KPIs? And so you will see things like the triple bottom line approach, where it's, profits is one of those bottom lines, but then also people and planet are the other two. So now you've got, those are kind of love based KPIs, right? And so, you also have conscious capitalism approach and KPIs attached there. So if you've got those in place, the system, and you've got a feedback loop in there, the system can maybe course correct at this stage, because you're optimizing toward, hey, here's our revenue KPIs, but here's also, our environmental standard KPIs and our customer satisfaction KPIs. And something's going sideways here, right? Goes back into the system and you course correct. So Tullio, let's just look at three of these to see how a reimagined feedback loop might have prevented the problems from continuing and helped marketing and sales stay on track.
Yeah, and I think the key word here is reimagining it with having love into the equation, because there's often this thinking that these profits and taking care of people are not always, intertwined. And that's a flawed way of thinking, because we've talked about it quite a few times. We've even provided data points on the ROI for actually infusing empathy, compassion, and love into the business. So let's just reimagine some of these major ones. I mean, probably one of the ones that had the most impact on many, many people, an entire economy really, was the countrywide financial and subprime mortgage crisis. So the problematic feedback loop was that they focus on short-term profits, incentivized by taking higher risks in lending. So short-term profits incentivized for the risky lending. So to do it, they had to basically buy into this idea that they had to take more risk. So imagine
looking at the quarterly numbers here. Hey, these are looking great. More, give me more, give me more.
Yeah, we got to break the rules and make it more risky. Now, how would that have taken place with love built into it? So imagine where the feedback loop was really about sustainable lending practices and borrower financial health. So, the financial health of the borrowers being closely monitored, and with profits tied to long-term loan performance rather than short-term gains, right? So rewarding the right type of loan for the right type of people, which is based on the individual's readiness, which is loving because it takes into account, can this person bear this loan, carry this loan? or is it going to make them bankrupt? So that's actually caring for the other individual. And if we do it this way and we reward giving the loans to the right people, then our performance will be one where it's profitable longer term. And so that's love two ways. One is loving the borrower by sometimes saying, nope, you're not the right borrower for this. And it's also loving the business long term because you're not putting the company at risk. So the positive outcomes for the borrowers would also lead to stronger financial system, and reinforcing responsible lending practices and also marketing and sales can focus more on financially stable, qualified prospects. So it's like, just get whoever can come in, convince them they can pay for it. Don't worry about whether they fail later, as long as we meet our short-term profits, versus, hey, what's the loving right thing to do? Let's sell stuff that can be sustainable for the right people. Let's target the right people who have the money, the interest rates are low, who can take advantage of this and create long-term value for everyone involved. The latter would have been showing a love for all involved. So now let's look at Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, with the creation of the fake accounts. The problematic feedback loop here was positive feedback loop where more accounts led to more rewards, reinforcing the behavior. So a few folks figured out how to get more commissions and meet the numbers, and a bunch of others followed, and it became a systemic thing. Hey, we can do this. Let's keep doing it.
You want 20 accounts this week? Here's 20 accounts.
I'll do that in my sleep. Before lunch, I'll have that done. Just done. Okay, so now the problem with that is there's no consideration for the customer who, much like myself, woke up saying, I didn't open this account. When did I open this account? You just gotta, and you're like scratching your head thinking, if I lost my mind, did I do something I forgot? So that's not loving to put someone through that process, right? But also put the business at risk and their reputation, because they have this beautiful reputation of being you get on the wagon with us, we're the pioneers, it's like, you can trust us. They ruined that. So they didn't think about that. So now, how could they have done this with a loving way, with a bliss approach, right? So the feedback loop would have been where customer satisfaction and ethical practices drove employee rewards and recognition. What a great concept. Happy customer, happy employee, Positive customer feedback would lead to reinforced ethical behavior and further improvements in customer service, creating a virtuous cycle of trust and integrity. Now, Wells Fargo for years had positioned themselves as a long-standing, trustworthy financial partner. We talked about that, right? But this would have moved them back to thinking more long-term again. So they needed to hold on to those values and purpose they started with and find ways to stay true to them. So, we spoke about it in the previous episodes. They didn't have enough controls, of oversight. But at the end of the day, the goal drove these outcomes. So the goal wasn't driven to create longer-term sustainable relationship. It was driven to how can we drive more accounts, right? It's kind of like having a quota. If you're a police officer, you're going to give tickets away just because you got to meet your quota. Not saying that happens, but that's not nice. Anyway, let's continue with Sears. It happens all the time. Sears Auto Center fraudulent repairs. Okay, here's another example, right? A problematic feedback loop. Incentives, rewards for higher sales reinforce fraudulent practices. Now imagine you are in the service business and you're being forced to sell more. Like you are there to service client need. You're in the to a certain degree, almost in the hospitality business, being in that space, right? You make money from repairing and solving problems, but now you got the pressure to figure out how to sell stuff to people. So you're turning service people into salespeople. That in itself was a problem, right? Now, what would have been a blissful approach? Again, to focus on building customer trust and satisfaction. You're in the service business. Service the client's need. Build trust with them. They'll come back. You'll get more business from them. So this would have created a feedback loop where honest service practices were rewarded with repeat business, and positive word of mouth from these customers would be social proof and also great reviews online, which would attract more customers to want to do business with you. So this in turn reinforces the company's commitment to ethical behavior and customer care. Marketing and sales can now focus on how trustworthy we are, how we are the most honest auto mechanic shop in the industry, where the customer's biggest pain point are always taken care of and put first. So one approach was all about get more sales. The other approach would have been like, you get to more sales by creating better service and more trust. This latter would have created more sales too by creating an environment where I want to go do business with that company. They're trustworthy. They're honest. I'm going to talk to all my neighbors about them. So either models would produce the same results, except one is short-term with drastic repercussions. The other one's long-term, maybe not as fast, but long-term with positive impact on everybody.
Yeah. So if my metrics are customer satisfaction and, building trust and seeing a customer come back year and year after year, and that's what I'm optimizing toward, in my input process outputs part of it. This is where maybe a feedback loop could just correct when it's not that. Oh, your customer satisfaction levels are really low. What's going on here? Oh, well, we've got, a salesman who's recommending, crap to our clients. So you can kind of course correct. But if recommending crap to clients is the goal, then the feedback loop's going to be like, great, good job. You recommended a lot of crap to clients and we're more profitable. So, failures are great teaching examples. So that's why we've kind of gone through this series of business scandals, and you can pick up a lot from what companies did to course correct. I think we're kind of learning that. Of course, for some, it was too late, but, question your systems, make sure the parts of your systems aren't taking your company into the wrong direction. I mean, yes, there are some bad actors in here, but there's a lot of good people who get caught up in their wake. And a lot of business systems out there are incentivizing for short-term gains and not taking a wider view. And so do you have zombie problems just waiting to rise from the dead in your business? We've got all of our profit goals and KPIs lined up, but do you have any KPIs that focus on the client's best interest, or your employees' well-being, or your community, or your planet? Like I said, like the triple bottom line approach there is the next step you can take if you're just focusing on profit. Focus on people and the planet. Take on more perspectives. Take on more of an empathetic approach to what you do. That's it for today's episode. Again, we do these deep dives with Tullio, Ash, and myself on Tuesdays. On Wednesdays, we have our short form 10-minute episodes right now doing business empathy topics. And join us on Thursdays, where we've been running live with guests and taking your questions during the podcast. Please like and subscribe and share with people who you think will benefit from these topics. And we will see you on the next Bliss Business Podcast.